posts a series of bizarre self-portraits. In one, he's dressed in a Knights Templar uniform. In another, he wears Freemason regalia. And in a third, in a biological warfare suit, apparently preparing poison-tipped ammunition. Finally, one is a Norwegian gentleman, writing, "We must look our best before the shoot."
There are a number of narcissistic features. The most obvious one is the dressing up. There are lots of photographs of Breivik in uniforms, the dressing up as a mason, carrying weaponry. He also is quite narcissistic about how those photographs are taken. He tells us in the manifesto that you should hire a professional makeup artist before you have your photograph taken. He says, I know it sounds a bit gay, but have a bit of makeup on before you have your photograph taken.
Breivik then puts the finishing touches on his manifesto, signing it Andrew Berwick, the English version of his name.
In many respects, this is Breivik's way of communicating with the wider world. His manifesto is for him, to use another analogy, his Mein Kampf.
Breivik's writings are part political rant, part terrorist handbook, part autobiography. He identifies himself as a 32-year-old former bank clerk, intelligent and motivated. He claims to have been a millionaire entrepreneur in years past. In reality, he's a recluse with only a handful of friends. He's known to be a bodybuilder, steroid user, and avid gun enthusiast. He goes on to describe himself as a right-wing crusader, a senior officer of the Knights Templar, and the scourge of Islam. He emails the documents to nearly 6,000 people, whom he regards as potential followers.
And he presses send on that computer. He would have seen that as being the culmination of his research, the beginning, though, of his next stage in his campaign.
Minutes later, Breivik leaves on his deadly mission. His destination is Oslo. His objective, mass murder. After 3 years of planning, he is ready to wage war. It takes 2.5 hours to drive his bomb-laden van from his farmhouse to the capital, roughly 100 miles away. It's a typical Friday afternoon in Oslo. People out shopping, workers looking forward to the weekend. Johan Tandberg is just one of hundreds of people walking through town.
It's a small city where people usually think they're very safe. We thought this was the safest place on earth.
But that innocence is about to be shattered. Breivik parks his van outside a block of government buildings, near the offices of Prime Minister Jens Stoltenberg, leader of the Norwegian Labour Party. Breivik has his detonator set to a timer and flees the area long before his homemade bomb goes off. Johan Tandberg is caught in the blast and captures this exclusive footage.
I started my camera and I saw to my left that the government building was totally destroyed. People on the street were laying around. Somewhere they lost their hearing. Blood coming out from everywhere, and people were in shock. It was terrible.
Breivik's homemade bomb, made from fertilizer and charged with fuel, has wreaked havoc on downtown Oslo.
I went from person to person to take the pulse, check if they were alive. Some were not. And yeah, what to do? I went on to the next kind of body.
8 people are killed in the deadly blast, and many more are seriously injured.
The pictures from New York 9/11 came back to me immediately, and I thought, okay, this is the terror we've been waiting for.
It's like nothing Norway has ever seen before, and it shakes this liberal and tolerant society to its core. But this is also an act of diversion.
All your resources are being funneled towards, for example, in this case, the bomb explosion. It's a big mistake, especially in the age of Al-Qaeda terrorism, where multiple attacks are quite frequent. And so if you send all of your ambulances or your police resources to, for example, the building, you're laying yourself completely open to an attack of the sort that took place.
As Oslo reels, Anders Breivik is already moving on. He hails a cab and heads to his second target. It's one thing to set a detonator. This time, Breivik will have to look each of his victims in the eyes. Utøya is a small island in the middle of Tyrifjord Lake, 20 miles north of Oslo. For generations, Utøya has hosted an annual summer camp for the children of the Labour Party elite and other young party members. The island is just 24 acres, roughly the length of 5 football fields, and half as wide across. As Breivik makes his way to Utøya, the island is abuzz with about 600 campers, including 21-year-old bartender Adrian Prekon, Vegard Grossli Weinsland, a politics student from Oslo, and 21-year-old Nicolene Bershi, who arrived on the island that morning.
It's beautiful out there. There are trees, there are rocks, it's just idyllic.
It's been like a really good place to come every summer since I was maybe 16 or 17 years. A place where I fall in love, a place where we've discussed the world problems and of course solved them, and a place that's really amazing.
Shortly before 5 p.m., Anders Breivik arrives at the lake dressed in a police uniform. He waves a fake ID at the ferryman and asks for a ride to the island. The ferryman helps him load his duffel bag full of weapons and ammo as they set out on the crossing, a little less than half a mile. Meanwhile, news of the Oslo bombing is just spreading through the camp.
People were confused. They were calling around their friends. They were hugging each other. They were crying.
The last thing said in these meetings was that we have to think about and remember that Utøya is probably the safest and best place we can be at this moment.
Somebody called their parents and they said oh, I'm so glad that you're on the island because then you're safe and we don't have to worry about you.
Little does anyone know what horror is headed their way. It's late afternoon on Friday, July 22nd, 2011, and Anders Breivik, dressed as a police officer, is closing in on the island of Utøya, where young Labour Party members meet for their annual retreat.
Rather than target Muslim communities, he wanted to focus on the next generation of left-wing leaders, and to that end headed to Utøya Island, where future leaders of the Labour Party were congregating.
He arrives at the eastern dock just after 5 p.m., brandishing his assault rifle, and kills his first victim 30 seconds later. He then makes his way up the main path towards the cafeteria, where most of the students are gathered after hearing news of the Oslo bombing.
He was in a police uniform, so I first saw him in a uniform just walking very calmly, and I thought, well, this must be good, but he was heavy armed. So I was thinking that was weird, but at least he was a policeman.
He very deliberately camouflages himself wearing a policeman's uniform. So quite clearly, it was a device wearing the uniform so as to reassure those people whose lives he was going to take.
Breivik beckons a group of young people over to him and then opens fire.
I heard screams. And I saw people running. And I saw people falling as they were running because they were shot in the back.
He went over to one of the people who was on the ground, who had fallen to the ground, and he shot him in the head. And then he went over to one of the others and shot him in the head as well.
People were coming up to our camp, just running as fast as they could and screaming and saying, yeah, people are shot and it's a guy with a gun and just run and keep your heads down. And at the point I was like, okay, this is just somebody's joking.
But the scene is terrifyingly real, and Breivik is just getting started. He walks through the campsite in the middle of the island, looking for victims and shooting them one by one. People panic and run for cover in the tented area. Adrian is among them.
People ran through the tent city. And halfway into the tent city, I stopped, turned around, hid behind a large tent just to see what was happening. He looked like a main character from a Nazi movie. He had his hair backwards. It was blonde hair backwards. He had that special look on his face, like a rock. So we walked off to the tents, opened them slowly. We looked inside, shut, and you can see the tent turning red from inside.
He was extremely calm. He was walking straight towards people, shot them. Walked in another direction, shot another person. Looked around, saw who else to shoot, shot him or her. He was calm.
The bomb being left outside the government building has a distance psychologically between the deaths of those people who will die as a result of the bomb exploding and Breivik. But when Breivik is shooting people on that island, he is looking into their faces.
Terrified campers begin scattering to the edges of the island, searching desperately for a hiding place.
People ran through the tent city.
People were just laying all over on top of each other to just try to hide and just try to be like invisible from the path where the killer was walking. But there was like too many people.
Some of the campers, like Vegard, barricade themselves inside the few buildings on the island.
I ran through like a short woody area, and then I came to this cabin where I hid with around 40 others. I hid in one of the bedrooms under the bed, and there I just hid and prayed.
Outside, Breivik continues to stalk his prey, searching and shooting.
He simply became a hunter. He simply became a one-man army, a soldier who had to do what he had to do. He would have been feeling so powerful, as if his mission was to exterminate, as he would see, to kill as many young people as he possibly could.
That's when I started texting home. You know, the last text message kind of thing. Thanks for everything. Love you all.
Many people try to take cover in the woods, while Nicoline's group heads toward the western shoreline and crouches on a small shelf hidden under a cliff.
The shelf was like a couple of meters down from the path, and we heard somebody change the magazine or refill the bullets on the gun, and we just heard like our hearts were like really beat from heart was like really loud, and everyone just tried to not breathe and not say words.
Breivik continues crisscrossing the island while dozens of campers like Adrian desperately try to stay one step ahead of him.
It was a bloody massacre. He was so calm, so relaxed, so controlled. You could tell that he had planned this for a long time.
At 5:27, police are first alerted to the gunfire on Utoya, but their arrival will be painfully slow. Breivik will have full run of the island for another terrifying hour. "30 minutes into his shooting spree, Anders Breivik has turned an idyllic summer camp into the scene of a bloody massacre. And his rampage isn't nearly over. He has picked the perfect location for his shooting spree. It's almost half a mile from shore, and police, distracted by Breivik's massive bombing in downtown Oslo, are an hour away. Dozens of terrified campers are still scrambling for survival, searching for new hiding places as the killer's hollow point bullets ring out across the island.
This was much worse than you see in a movie. But everybody was focused that when you are on the run on the island, you need to go down to the water, jump into the water. And so we did.
Long before police arrive, a news helicopter is dispatched to the island to investigate reports of gunfire.
We started looking around in the water, and of course we could see a lot of people swimming in all directions, and then we could see the boats, and then you kind of start looking at things differently, and you start